Right now in Canada, a growing number of homeowners are literally being stuck. They cannot sell, they cannot move, they cannot upgrade, and the pressure is constantly building. Yes, this does not happen all at once, and the buyers, they just don't disappear into the air. However, there are three phases that I would love to talk to you about in this video, how it happened, and you will recognize exactly from phase one and the next phase that we will face and the final third phase. So let's get right into the video. But before I get into the phases, it is important to talk that at one point, Canadian real estate market moved the economy. It moved how we were purchasing. It moved how we were considering our retirement funds. It moved the entire country slowly, gradually. It moved the country with security. But it seems like at this point that this security of real estate is shifting. And as I said and mentioned before, it does not happen overnight. It does not happen in your face and suddenly. It happens in phases. So let's get into phase one. So in phase one is the holding period. So people adjust, they cut spending, they reduce their lifestyle, they absorb higher payments. So we went through that in 2023, 2024, 2025, and we're still continuing to experience this phase one. However, we're slowly pivoting into phase two because people already understand at this point that there's no comeback. They have been in this game, in this fight, in this downward pressure for a long time. They fought high interest rates. Now today they're fighting high gas prices, and I'll get into that in phase two and phase three. Now phase two is where the pressure is basically taking over, and I believe that we're now in phase two, and savings begin to drop. I have spoke to many people and they've experienced that. Look, my savings are down like 1,000%. And people start to panic because that cushion, that saving is gone. Flexibility disappears. So what we're talking about flexibility doesn't always have to be the financial flexibility. It could be the flexibility of, I would say, freedom or will or something where the idea, right? Because more money, more ideas, and also more flexibility. Let me give you an example. Let's say you live in Toronto and you would like to send your child to study in Calgary, Edmonton, Halifax, Vancouver, Hawaii, you name it. When the funds are available and the savings are in proper place and the security exists for the livelihood and the household, it's less of a problem, right? However, if those things disappear, which are disappearing in huge lump sums, options become limited and it creates different type of pressure. So let's move. Now, it's not just comfortable, it's restrictive. And this is where the people beginning feeling stuck. They feel that any move that they will do on a chessboard will cost them tremendous amounts of money, which is true. So what do? They get stuck, they get locked, they get frozen, the options get limited, and just future predictions and the way they live, it gets kind of shaken, let me call it that way. So now let's get into phase three. Before I get into phase three, do you believe that phase one, phase two was correct so far? So please comment below while you're at it, like the video and subscribe. So phase Three, forced move, and we're slowly getting into that atmosphere of the forced move. We have seen that with investors already, and the condo market throughout Canada, not only Toronto, GTA, and the core cities of Vancouver, maybe Calgary, but we have seen it all across the country where people are now forced with lean, I would say, cash flow, but everything else seems to rise, including gas, as I mentioned before. Because now when you're driving, it's taking a huge cut off of your paycheck. Think about that for a second. Like at one point, buying a house in a suburb was the way to go. I understand different mindset, different schedule, different force, different thinking patterns throughout the pandemic, whatever. But now that house is a burden, not only time consuming, not only traveling to work, not only commuting to work, it requires a lot of money, right? So all of a sudden, that's becoming not an option anymore. But what do? Now they're forced, if they cannot afford it, they're forced to sell. If they sell, they will lose. Nobody likes to lose. So they feel stuck. They feel that they have to kind of go through the pain and they will somehow get out of it. But now, the phase three is where the things completely change. Holding is not longer possible. We're seeing that in the market slowly. The pressure becomes too much and decision stops being optional. It starts becoming forced. And we just talked about that. Now the escalation, and this is where it starts to affect the market in a lump sum, because this doesn't stay at an individual level. At one point so far in level one, it might be an individual level, level two might be an individual level, but level three, when it's forced, it impacts you directly. The price, list price, sale price, sold price on your street, in your community, impacts you directly. Even though maybe you might not be impacted, maybe you paid off your home long time ago, maybe you don't care about the market currently and the current situation, you can absorb the hits. However, you are planning for your retirement. So what happens if your neighbor or a neighbor in a community has to sell for a loss? You're automatically impacted heavily, and that creates chaos. It creates forced sale, and we have already seen that pattern in the condo market. I have mentioned in many of my other videos before that condo market was the first phase trigger, and it can trigger the rest of real estate market. I said this in 2022, way before they started increasing the interest rates. And why? Because the critics at that time said, well, those are two different products. We have condo and condo new builds. What does this have to do with detached home and other types of real estate? It's a completely different market. And yes, you are right. However, during the phase of expansion, when people were purchasing these condos and when people were coming up with deposits for these condos, usually a lump sum of 20% over a period of time before the close. And let's say, just give an example, okay? So you say $500,000 condo, 20%, it's $100,000. On $1 million condo, it was $200,000, which was not unusual. At the peak levels, condos were normally priced at $850, $900, $1 million plus. So those lump sums, those deposits and that savings didn't come from a saving. It came from an equity build in a detached home, or it came from an equity build from parents or grandparents. So all of that added up now, and now it's in the bottleneck. where the escalation, and this is where it starts because it doesn't stay as an individual level, and it starts to show up in the listings, in pricing and activity. When people are forced to act, they don't act with ideal conditions. So when people are pinned to the wall, they have no way out. They will not think about their community, their neighbor. They have to save themselves. And usually, when they come to that, unfortunately, when they come to that situation, they will do anything just to get out as fast as they can. And even if that could be tragic for themselves and their neighbor. Now, the consequence, the market is not adjusting to normal movement. It's building pressure first and releasing it later. And when the release happens, it doesn't look controlled. And we know that the market, in a graph, we have seen the income and we have seen the pricing, and it kept kind of being away from each other because you want these two lines to be as close as possible. Real estate pricing versus income, right? So it's okay to have, the real estate being 3 to 5 times more than an average income. But at one point, it started to split, and through the pandemic, it shot up ridiculously, which created additional pressure. So if we're looking at peaks throughout history, our peak today was the peak like a Mount Everest peak. It was huge. So therefore, the expectation for a decline, suffering, and everything else that's building up, the pressure build up so high that when it's dropping, it can drop fairly, I would say, uncontrolled, and it can drop further than we expect. And just to add something else, I spoke to someone, Portuguese background, and fun guy, whatever, we kind of chit-chatted, and he told me, he's like, look, now I understand. I said, what is it that you understand that you did not understand prior? Because we were talking whether he should sell at the peak. It was a big no. Then we talked about in the feathering moments when the interest rate started to rise up. He said absolutely not. It's just a short shift. It will flip back up. So now he said, like, look, me, I didn't believe that we will get to this level. Then his grandfather said there is a possibility, but his dad said there's a high potential of a huge crash. So you see how there are different layers of thinking. Grandfather said there's potential, and I thought about that. I said, why? Like I asked myself the question, why? Because grandfather went through these phases many times. In these phases, he always got on top, okay? But this is unlike anything, anything we have seen prior to that, because the pressure that was built up, it was much, much higher than previous pressures. So that's one. Two, the sun, he said it can happen. Okay, this is understandable because they have never felt it on their skin. And that's very important to note, because if people don't have that experience, if they only see the gain, then they only see the gain. They don't know how it is to lose, or to have a negative cash flow, or to have a negative equity in their home, and so on and so on. So the dad understood because he's in between the old and the new, right in between. So they understood that, look, there's a potential because the job is weakening, gas prices are getting up, things are shifting, my job is slowing, or employment is slowing down. So there is a potential of a major crash. When? Nobody knows. But is it coming? Absolutely it's coming. We just don't know the exact year and the month. But what we can see so far, On top of the build-up Mount Everest pressure, there's more pressure being built up on Canadians. So I hope you gained some value out of this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.